which members of the political class actually learn from experience?
Well, it kind of varies what they learn. I put this in kind of a game theoretic context. So, so either each party has a cooperate strategy and a defect strategy. So for the Democrats, cooperating means being willing to cut entitlements. For Republicans, cooperating means being willing to raise taxes, or certainly raise revenues. And what what everyone can see is that if they both cooperate, things work out better than if they both defect. And so when you say, well, they're going to learn that, well, I think everyone knows that we're better off if they both cooperate than if they both defect. The problem is it's a classic prisoner's dilemma situation where the base of each party makes it such that the dominant strategy for both parties is to defect. That is, the Republican base wants the Republican Party to reject tax increases no matter what, and the Democratic base wants the Democratic Party to reject substantial entitlement cuts no matter what, and so you end up in the quadrant where they both defect. Just as an observation, all of this discussion is really speculation about politics and the political situation. We'd love to be able to say we can analyze this prospect for default based on pure economics, but we're just basically making some assessments about how the politics will play out.
Well, and Garrett, tell me, when Arnold referenced prisoner's dilemmas, it struck me that there is a lot of interesting research about how people with higher levels of cognitive ability tend to actually be better at resolving prisoner's dilemmas, though, of course, as Arnold suggests, there's a different structural dynamic in which you have a polarized political system, and so the teams might have some kind of they're cooperating amongst each other, and they might conclude that the superior strategy is, as Arnold says, to defect. Tell me, how do you think that is likely to play out over the kind of medium and long term? Just kind of like addressing as a prisoner's dilemma.
No, I'm a big fan of Arnold's view that this is a prisoner's dilemma between the parties. I teach it to my students, actually. I think it's a classic example of the prisoner's dilemma, and B, how repeating the game year after year can give you the scope for real cooperation. So the question is, do political parties feel like they're going to be in power long enough? Do the leaders of both parties feel like they're going to be in power long enough that cooperating is a long-run strategy that makes sense? I think I'm with Arnold that his scenario speaks to why both parties will feel like defecting. However, there is one possible solution, which is that every once in a while, the Republicans get voted out of power. And during those periods, Democrats raise taxes, and then Republicans keep those tax increases later on. So I think that kind of scenario where voters basically vote out Republicans in order to get the occasional tax increase, most of which then sticks, is a pretty likely part of our future.
One point I'd point out is that that would be a scenario in which other countries could have a say in, let's say, our defense budget. Imagine China saying, well, you guys, if you want to keep borrowing in the international credit markets, you're going to have to reduce your defense spending back to what other countries spend, or something like that.
So one way to interpret your intervention in this debate is that you want people to understand a realistic scenario in which gridlock persists, and the result is this endgame of kind of this real diminution of American sovereignty. Do you think that is something that would that would shock some politicians, say on the center right, out of their complacency regarding revenue levels? Do you think that's something that might convince at least some people to think, well, maybe we should countenance Bull Simpson-style increases in federal revenues?
I think there's a group for which that argument would hold. It includes, I think, a group of Republicans that have never been that keen on lowering spending. There's a group that says, big government is fine as long as we're in charge of it. But that faction is the faction that's getting whacked by the Tea Party. Okay.
So Garrett, tell me,
actually, hold on one second. Just a second here. Go ahead then. Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking that this scenario that you lay out is particularly potent politically because what you're positing is that the high savings countries of the present, something that Garrett had introduced a moment ago, are these oil-rich countries, predominantly Muslim. Then you have China, and you basically have a collection of countries that I wouldn't say that many American populists are particularly friendly to. And what you're saying is that this negotiated default scenario is one in which those countries are going to have an extraordinary amount of power over the shape of fiscal consolidation in the United States unless people get out of their defensive crouches. So, I mean, Arnold, is part of the reason you're talking about negotiating default the desire to grab people by the lapels and kind of shock them into taking action?
No, actually, I didn't have that agenda in mind. I just, took my thoughts where they led me.
Well, Garrett, tell me, is it possible that you, in offering the contrary view, are actually preaching complacency?
You never know how your message is going to get interpreted, right? I mean, so on some level, what I'm trying to do is show people a path forward, right? If it works out, it will be because something like this happens. But the opposite is also true. If things don't work out, it'll be probably because one of the links in my chain are missing. So let's look at the links in that chain and find out which is the weakest link.
So what do you think are the potential weakest links in the chain that you've constructed?
I do think, as I mentioned before, I think the GOP's view on taxes is something that international bondholders probably worry a lot about. If I ask myself, if I'm an international bondholder, I'm running some fund that has $1 billion or $2 billion of U.S. Treasuries sitting in there, who do I get more worried about? Do I get more worried about Democrats or about Republicans? It's probably Republicans I worry more about. And part of that is that Democrats are willing to talk one way and then vote another. Republicans, when it comes to revenues, have not done